again in the future. So if you don't follow everything today and you want to come back and you want to view this information in the future, you will be able to do so. And we try to get those recordings up and available to you as quickly as possible. Essentially this morning, our presentation will consist of 3 parts. We're going to go over this introductory portion where we give you the background and the intent of using BidBuy in the state of Illinois. And then we will take you and walk you through an overview of the general navigation within BidBuy, and also then provide you with an overview of the release off master process. Once we finish doing that, we will actually take you in detail and step you through a release off master process, as well as take a little bit of a deeper dive and take you out to some specialized procurement types that we know you may have questions on. In particular, we're going to be discussing releases off master contracts where they are established as a discount percent off of the list price. So as we go through each of the sections this morning, we'll stop for some question and answer periods. If, as we're going through the presentation, you have a question, please type it in using your GoToWebinar interface, and we will either stop our presentation if we feel that it's really relevant and we're at a good point to stop, or else we'll have specific break times where we will circle back and answer any questions. If there is anyone out there who wants to actually be unmuted, please raise your hand within the system and we can unmute and have a dialogue. But we do have a large number of attendees that are on this morning, and we have found that in most cases, most folks are very comfortable sending us their questions in writing and then our responding back during the webinar. So that's just sort of our general housekeeping for this morning, and with that, we will go ahead and get started. So what we're going to go through right now is understanding the purpose of BidBuy, what our implementation schedule is going to be, how ongoing support will work out at your agency, and then allow you to provide questions and feedback and give us feedback. So the first question is what is BidBuy? BidBuy is the joint initiative of the CPO's office and CMS. So it is a joint initiative and applies to all agencies under the authority of the CPO's office for general services. BidBuy is a cloud-based e-procurement system, and what that means is that it is a customizable program that we bought from a vendor and have access to out in the cloud in terms of being able to store information. The reason for buying a cloud-based system is that that has long been the direction of the state of Illinois, which has been to procure cloud-based systems which allow our software programs to remain up to date and competitive and receive frequent updates from our vendors. The system that we bought is highly configurable, so we are able to go in and configure the system, and that actually has been the process that we have been working on, as you've probably heard, as we've been working on BidBuy, is to configure the system to make sure that the system and all of the related processes meet all of the requirements of the state of Illinois as it relates to procurement. In addition to configuring the system, we have also been working on establishing integrations or interfaces to other existing systems in the state of Illinois, and those integrations include an integration into the vendor system for both the IPG and BEP. So those interfaces are established and currently functional, so that BidBuy talks to those systems and they share information. Also, as it relates to the PPB, specifically as it relates to the reporting requirements for the PPB clearinghouse, there is an interface, and we've also established a process for obtaining PPB waivers. We are also working currently and finalizing an interface out to the state's new financial system, which is known as either ERP or SAP. It kind of goes by a couple of different names, but that interface is being finalized, and we have been preparing the BidBuy processes both for agencies that are currently live in ERP and those that will be going live in the near future. So that is the status of the various integrations. So those are all of the new things that we have been working on. We've had a lot of questions about, what is staying the same as it relates to BidBuy. And one of the common questions that we've received is, is a procurement justification still required within BidBuy? And the answer is yes. So there still is a procurement justification. It is not done in the same way as it has been done in the past, but it will still exist. That procurement justification will still exist within BidBuy. We will also continue to use the NIGP codes. So the NIGP codes are the basis for procurements within BidBuy. Nothing has changed there. The other item that stays the same is the requirements from the comptroller for wet ink contracts. So agencies will still be required to maintain wet ink contracts. But here are all of the things that are currently separate and distinct systems that you're accustomed to working in on a daily basis that now will move and become the BidBuy system going forward. So currently you may use some or all of these, the remedy system, a manual email survey process for aggregating procurements, the Illinois Procurement Bulletin, a procurement file maintained at your agency either through hard copies or electronic copies or a combination of all of those other things, and then the CPO and SPO approval forms and documents have all been part of the process that you're accustomed to. In the future, all of that activity will exist within BidBuy. So BidBuy will become the central location for all procurement activity at the $2,000 threshold and above. And we'll walk you through some of those thresholds today and explain all of that to you. But important to mention at this point is BidBuy will also become the procurement file. It will be the procurement file as it relates to the permanent record, but we must also remind you that if your agency has other record retention requirements, you must also follow those requirements too. So why are we doing BidBuy? And probably the first and number one reason for BidBuy is that we have legacy systems that are no longer supported. So we simply don't have the option to continue doing procurement using the systems that we have, which is why we are doing a transition over to Release Off Master at this time in particular, and having all of those procurements occur within BidBuy. Another driver for the decision to go to any procurement system is to enhance and increase the ability of the state to utilize strategic procurement data and analysis. So BidBuy will be bringing together all of the procurement data across agencies and allowing the state to look at the procurement trends, the procurement needs, any duplications or redundancies, and be able to create a cost savings methodology based on solid actual procurement data. The other is to provide an automated workflow. So, right now in various agencies, your procurement effort, as we just went through all of the other systems that we will start discontinuing, has been a mix of systems that you came in and out of and emails that you would receive. Well, now all of that information is going to exist through an automated workflow that takes you from the initial stage all the way through the end of the procurement process. And not only will the workflow be automated, there will also be a comprehensive history of all the actions that take place throughout the life of a procurement. And the other thing is that it will also result in a centralized contract inventory so that you can better manage and look at your contracts, look at contracts that are getting ready to expire, look at contracts that are getting ready to be renewed, and be able to better manage your workflow and be able to look and see both the individual work you have as well as, work across the agency. So there will be a centralized location for all of that information. So implementation, and what is the plan for that? We have had vendor registration live within BidBuy for quite some time, and we also have the interfaces of the Illinois Procurement Gateway, or the IPG, and the BEP interfaces operational. So our vendors have had the opportunity to go in and register into the system. Vendors also have a location of support information called the Pathway to Procurement, which provides a central resource for them to go and find supporting documents and information related to the new procurement processes in the state of Illinois. And as I mentioned earlier, our release off master will go live on October 16th, and that will be a hard cutover. So as of October 16th, there will be no more release off master contracts in IGPS. And then our full procurement go live process begins on January 1 of 18. And this past week, we had an agency-wide meeting going through and explaining in detail the full procurement go live process. And agencies will be receiving additional communications in the near future with further details, as well as opportunities to attend additional training. And I have a question. Someone wanted to know, how were the vendors informed of the necessity to register through BidBuy? When we left the sell to Illinois bid process and went to NIGP, not all vendors were aware of the need to make the change. Vendors have received multiple communications. There have also been notices posted on the IPG, and so there has been an extensive effort to reach out to vendors and explain, and it is also an ongoing effort. So there are ongoing vendor communications throughout each stage of transition where we reach out to the vendors that are currently registered in the IPG, as well as communications that go through the CMS BEP program to reach out to those vendors, as well as communications coming through the small business program and that pool of vendors. But if there are any concerns, if you should have vendors that you're aware of that may not be fully apprised, feel free to communicate directly with your own vendors and explain that information to them. But please be assured that we are making every effort we can to reach out to our vendor pool and make sure that they are kept up to date. But as we all know, in our busy lives and our busy schedules, it's very easy to miss a communication that we think isn't, super relevant, or overlook an email. So if you want to make further effort to communicate with your vendors, please do so. We wanted to share with you the support materials that are available, and we have tried to create an extensive array of materials in a variety of different formats. Each agency has a trainer at their agency that communicates with us on a regular basis, in fact, a weekly basis, and where we provide updates and information to those trainers to share back at their agency. But your trainers have access and can provide you with access to, comprehensive step-by-step manuals. There are process manuals, and we are also in the process of finalizing a set of very short job aids, which are tools that you can sit next to your computer and walk through step by step as you are doing a release off master, and then as we go to full go live, doing other kinds of procurements. So there are a lot of training information as well as video recordings that are available for specific types, such as the presentation we're doing today will be recorded and made available to everyone. We did want to share with everyone on this call that we have a very specific end user support process, and the reason we have this specific process is so that you can get your questions answered as quickly as possible. So as I said, we talk weekly with our trainers as a group and then share back results, instantaneously or very quickly. But as an end user, if you have a question as it relates to doing a release off master, the first thing you want to do is reach out and ask your BidBuy trainer and see if they know the answer, and there's a very good likelihood that they will. If the trainer is unable to answer the question, then as a group you should reach out to the APO at your agency to see if the APO has an answer. If the APO is unclear as to the approach or the appropriate direction, then it's time to reach out and ask the SPO. And if the SPO is unaware, the SPO then will reach out to the help desk and everyone will be included in the response. So as you can imagine, as we're moving towards the first go live activity for state agencies, we will probably have lots of questions coming in, and this will help us all to ensure that we're able to see all the questions that are coming in, provide consistent responses, and then get that information back to you as quick as we can. If you have some specific questions related to the contract that you're working on or a release that you're working on off of a contract, you can still reach out to the buyer that is listed on that contract. So that is something that hasn't changed. If the question is specific to the contract, please do reach out to the buyer that's listed. You don't have to go through this process. At this point, I will open this up to any specific questions. I also have a group in the room with me, and I'll take a moment to introduce them now. So presenting other portions of the program this morning will include Amy Adams. Amy is the project manager for the CPO General Services Office as it relates to the BidBuy project in general, so she will be providing a portion of the presentation. And Samantha Kelton is with us, and she's a member of the BidBuy core team who is focused almost exclusively on developing training materials and working on the training programs that we'll be offering you going forward. So, seeing no additional questions, what I'm going to do now is turn this over to Samantha, and she will start sharing with you the actual BidBuy system itself. So someone has proposed a question. This will not include agency-specific CMS contracts at all, correct?
It will cover those that are statewide masters. But if it's for, let's say, for instance, flour for one of the industries, no, it would not cover that at this time.
Thank you for that question. And we have a further question, the process is in parallel. So I think that question refers to an agency-specific CMS master contract, you know, being parallel with all releases off master.
Here's another one.
So if we can maybe answer the question has to do with the releases off master that will be live on October 16th, I think, versus the CMS, the specific agencies.
Right, the agency masters. That was only the intention for the statewide master contracts to go live.
Okay.
So the process will be the same.
But yes, when that occurs, it will be the same as how they're doing it, how they will be doing releases off master in the future.
Okay. And we have another question. If a procurement starts in Remedy, we understand it can be completed in Remedy. Does start mean it's been entered as a draft or something else? Okay, we'll turn that over to Amy Adams.
This process is a little bit different for release off masters. We had notified the agencies in the team meeting that the cutoff date for ordering in IGPS is Thursday at 5 o'clock. So for this portion of Go Live, any order that needs to be completed for the agency must be done in IGPS. And when I say done, I mean input and processing in IGPS in order for it to continue. If at 5 o'clock on Thursday, next Thursday, or this Thursday, you have not done that step, then you cannot complete that order through IGPS, and you will need to go through BidBuy to do that as of the 16th.
Okay, and we have another question where someone says, what is Remedy? And Remedy is one of the current systems that are used during the procurement process, and
For the procurement business case.
for the PBC, what may be known as the PBC is also known as Remedy, or the procurement business case. So, but that is a process as it relates to the statewide release off master contracts that will no longer exist. That part of the process, which essentially was the procurement justification, will now occur within BidBuy.
And not all agencies have used Remedy, so that may be a reason why that term is not familiar to some users attending this training.
And then someone said, who is the BidBuy, the IDOT BidBuy trainer? And we can reach out with any specific agency questions, and so we'll follow up on that question. And then can you further explain if our agency is currently using ERP? And if you have some agency-specific questions, rather than go through that today, what you will want to do is reach out within your agency. If you do not know who your trainer is, reach out to find out who your trainer is. And if you do not know your ERP status, you can also reach out to your BidBuy trainer at your agency to ask some of those questions. And then we have another one that says, as a follow-up question, what about non-IGPS procurements on statewide master contracts?
They should be ready, I believe. It may be a case-by-case basis. So I guess the question is, which particular master are you talking about? And because all the do-it contracts are also out and available, and all the CMS master contracts are out and available.
Also, what we'll do is, with the agency team meeting last week, some of these questions are topics that we covered during that webinar, and so we can make sure that that gets sent out and everyone attending this training can also view that agency team meeting recording. And that might answer some of your questions as well that have to deal with, what contracts are included, what is the process for switching over from IGPS to BidBuy, what type of contracts, those types of questions. So we'll be sending that out as well.
Hands up. Oh, someone had a, yeah. And we're doing just a quick check to see if anyone has their hand currently up. And it looks like we may have answered that question for the person who has their hand up. And so we're going to go ahead and put that hand down, but if you do have another question, go ahead and put your hand up if you want us to unmute you so that you can talk to us. We do have a comment here from Do It, and they're asking us to remind you and remind everyone that the ESR process has not changed. So that requirement remains in place and sits outside of the BidBuy process. So just to make that clear, for IT procurements, the ESR process remains in place.
In general, the process is outside of BidBuy. So the need for justification form, the need for the Do It requirements, or any other internal type of requirements that your agency has. If you're not certain if those have changed or not, please feel free to reach out to whoever you would contact in those instances to ensure that you're following the proper procedures.
So it looks like we have a couple of questions about ordering off of larger contracts. So we have a question: I order supplies for our agency off the statewide CMS contract. We will also have to use BidBuy when placing office supply orders off the new statewide CMS? And then related to that question, a very similar question based on catalogs.
Yes, you will be using the BidBuy for the Granger type contracts, as you gave an example of. And also, when the statewide master contract for office supplies is officially awarded, it will be on BidBuy as well, and you'll order it through that system.
Okay, so I think at this point it's a good time to turn it over to Samantha, and I think some of the kinds of questions that you have, she will be answering during her presentation.
This is Samantha Kelton. Today I'm going to go over the general navigation of the system, and our objectives in this section of the training will be to understand and use BidBuy terminology, understand the procurement workflow within BidBuy, understand and explain user roles, understand and use the BidBuy homepage, and also to understand the BidBuy document type. On the meeting invitation, you did receive an attachment that is labeled General Overview. You will see this information listed on that document, and it will be an Adobe document that you can review this as well. There are several different user roles that you will see most often in your agency: a department access role, which is going to be basically a requisitioner or contract shopper role. And there will also be a basic purchasing role. This will be to basically do everything from creating all documents within the system from scratch through purchase order. It can create all of the documents agency-wide, from requisition, bid, purchase order, amendments, change orders, and revisions. So if you are going to troubleshoot within the system, it's always good to look at your user role to verify if you have the access to be able to complete what you're trying to complete within the system. And then there will also be approver roles, and these will be for the release off master. There are opportunities for approval at both the requisition and purchase order phase. So there is going to be an approver role that is able to go in and approve those stages of procurement. The general document structure within the system is rec to bid to PO. As I stated, there are other situations that don't go through all three of those stages, as the release off master does go directly from the requisition to the purchase order. But it is important to know that each of these are called a document within the system. There is a specific document numbering here that you can see listed as first number that you'll see within the system will be the fiscal year, then the organization ID, the department ID, the document letter. So you can see here, this is an R for requisition, a B for bid, and a P for purchase order. And the last number is the record number within the system. And BidBuy creates that number, so it will be specific to each phase of each document within the system. And on that general overview, it does give the full information of what each document description is, as well as the legacy system that this portion of the procurement will be taking place of. So for requisition, the legacy system that this will be taking place of is the procurement business case or remedy, IGPS, surveys, and the procurement file. The bid will take place of the Illinois Procurement Bulletin for general services, and will be the procurement file, as well as the purchase order will be the taking place of IGPS and will be the procurement file. It's very important to understand the terms crosswalk because this will be new terms, and a couple of the words are used that you use today. So please be sure that you're reviewing this information when you're going throughout the system to understand it fully. And the current term that is used is a solicitation or notice, and within BidBuy, this is called a bid. The current term IPB registered user is now a bidder in BidBuy. An addendum is called an amendment in BidBuy. The bid, offer, or response is called a quote in BidBuy. An award information is the bid tab. The contract is the purchase order within BidBuy. And an amendment is the change order. It's very important to understand this terminology and know that since this is that cloud-based system, that does have a few different terms than you may be used to. So this crosswalk can be really helpful to you to better understand that cloud-based terminology within BidBuy. So for the release off master process, again, this is what I was talking about, that it doesn't go from rec to bid to PO, it goes directly from a rec to a purchase order. So you'll see here these blue arrows making a circle. If you see that on any of our documentation, that shows that there's an opportunity for approval, and the approval paths that have been set up within the system are chosen by the agency, reviewed by the agency, and made sure that this follows your agency requirements for approval. We do have a question here that says, what is the difference from an amendment and a change order?
So there's no difference between an amendment and a change order other than the term that is used within BidBuy. So what had previously been referred to within the state as an amendment to a contract within the BidBuy system is referred to as a change order. So it's the term or the name that has changed.
You'll find with these processes, as you continue to learn more about the system and attend training opportunities within your agency or through webinars like this, that you may be doing a change order in BidBuy, but still needing to attach supporting documentation. So just as Lori said, you know, the documentation currently states amendment. That documentation, you know, will still be the same. Those requirements are still the same, but they may be included as an attachment on the change order in BidBuy. So we're trying for this training to say focus on release off master. So try not to send out too much information at this time that goes kind of off topic from what's needed for releasing off master contracts.
The BidBuy organization structure is set up with the parent organization of State of Illinois, and then each organization agency is set up individually. The reason why this is important to you is that when you are looking in the system, your org that you are listed under will only show what is pertinent to you. So if you are looking up current release off masters in the system, you'll only see what you are able to order off of. You won't see every other organization's information and their recs or bids or POs within the system. It will just show you what is pertinent to you. So if you do, for any reason, have access to multiple agencies, make sure that you're reviewing which organization that you are in to verify that you have access to the appropriate information. If you have switched agencies, make sure that that correct organization or agency is listed at the top for you, and I'll show you exactly where to look in the system to see that information. This reviews the state user roles, and within purchasing, the department access role will be the ability to be a contract shopper to release off of master contracts. Basic purchasing can create initial procurements. An approver can review and approve in procurements, and inquiry role will be able to view only within the system. The BidBuy functional flow is that there at the top of the screen is the role, which would be that DA, VP, or inquiry role. There is a header and navigation, which allows movement within the application to give you different links to quickly access information. A control system that gives you all of the documents, no matter what document structure or document type it is, it's available to you within that control center. And also, screen information is designed to go from left to right in a tabular structure, top to bottom. So the same way that you read a book, left to right, top to bottom, and then you'll submit at the bottom of the page. And it goes by tabs. So you'll see tabs going from left to right that need to be completed within the system. You can see here at the top the role that I was talking about for the basic purchasing, department access, inquiry. These are all listed at the very top. There's the header that gives the NIGP code browse, account information, customer service. This right here is where your current organization will list, and then you would be able to click these double arrows to change that organization if necessary. It's very important to have this date and time. Your procurement, no matter which document phase it is in within the system, will be date and time stamped with the BidBuy date and time. So we want to be sure that anything that is received in paper is also stamped with that BidBuy date and time, so that it is very clear and transparent throughout the system that it is the same date and time. It doesn't go by a date and time on your desk, or your computer may be different. It's very important that it goes by the BidBuy date and time if you're date and time stamping anything. The structure in the system also gives here to the top right the icons that can be clicked when you hover over them. That will give you what these icons mean. The advanced search feature is going to be used very frequently for you. And then there's also the navigation bar. The navigation bar is going to be drop-down menus that are quick and easy to use. When Lori gets into the system, she's going to really dive into being able to how to do the release off master information. But just so you know, this is the navigation bar that you will be able to use within the system. And always remember, when in doubt, go home. Click that home button to bring you back to your home screen. If you're in the system anywhere and you get a little bit confused of where to go, when in doubt, go home. This is your control center. This is what will be in a tab structure. When you see this, it will have all of the tabs that you can go through from left to right. and gives you access to everything that pertains to you within each of these tabs. You'll see things that are in parentheses. These are how many that you have currently either in progress, ready for approval, ready for purchasing. You can see sub-tabs within each of those tabs. So here's the tab, here's the sub-tab, so that you can see the actual, what the status is within the system for each of those documents. I won't have you log into BidBuy yet. I am showing you this information so that you're able to see what the login page is for the train environment. That's really important that you go into train rather than the prod environment, because train will not send notifications to vendors. So if you're going into the system to practice, this is the link that you will use and be able to practice within the system, and it will automatically ask you to change your username and password when you log in.
I do want to add, please do not enter real vendor data into the train environment. You can create your own fake vendor account if you'd like to see how documents processed, such as the bid tab, the purchase order, those types of things when you gain access to the system if you haven't already. But please do not enter real vendor data into the train environment. And when I say real vendor data, don't create a vendor account with real vendor data. Thank you.
So we have another question that just came in, and it's a very good question. I don't have a training login. When will this be sent? You will receive your training login from your trainer at your agency. Trainers at the agency can reach out and request those training logins for you. So you will receive that specifically from the trainer at your agency.
So next we'll go through the document navigation, and this is listed again on that general overview. It gives you that document structure, and this gives a little bit more information directly to the release off master. So what is a requisition in the system is what agencies will use to request those goods and services as the release off master, and it will go directly from a requisition to a purchase order. And a change order will be attached to execute with the executed contract. It includes the procurement justification form for over $10,000 procurements, and approvals occur at the agency level. Again, those approval paths are set up by the agency based on your requirements.
I would like to add real quick that we also have statewide approvals in place. So if it needs to be seen by a CMS or an STO or what have you at the statewide level, those are also configured in the system.
These are the different statuses that you'll see on a requisition when you're within the system, and it gives a little bit more detailed information of what each of those statuses mean, so that you'll be able to reference this later. We'll also have this PowerPoint presentation. It's available to you on the meeting invitation that you received, and if you did not receive it, your trainer at your agency should have it attached to that same meeting invitation, so you can have this as a reference guide as well as within our system manual. The purchase order will be sent to the vendor. It can be the executed contract will be sent over to the vendor to sign, and will still require the 3 wet ink signatures for that over $20,000. And here are the purchase order statuses that you will see within the system as well. So what is a change order? The change order is used to attach the fully executed contract, and it will be included within the procurement file. So when you are within the system with Lori, she will review how to put in that change order and how to have that fully executed contract attached to that procurement file. Here are the change order statuses. And if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them now. Lori will be jumping into the system so that she can go over how to complete that release off master, and I will hand it over to her.
Okay, so while I am pulling the system up and getting ready to do the demonstration for you, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them, as well as the document that will be helpful to you as I go through this part of the presentation is identified as the Release Off Master job aid. So it's a two-sided document, and it will give you a very brief step-by-step through the system. And I do have a question. Is there going to be a process to order catalog supplies under $200? Do we have to use BidBuy, or what will be the process? So in terms of catalog supplies, I'll ask Cindy Krebs, who's joined us from CMS.
Those can be purchased through BidBuy as well. The difference between BidBuy and IGPS is these orders are going to go directly from your desk to the vendor. There will be no obligation. So that is the benefit of BidBuy. You'll be able to place those orders immediately. And so any order under $200 could be done through BidBuy. And that way there is a record of those procurements made.
And then a question, what about the procurement justification form for IT purchases from $5,000 to $9,999? So whenever there is a current requirement above and beyond the general requirements, and if there is a requirement for a procurement justification at a certain dollar threshold, I believe you will do part of that process through the ESR, and then you also have the ability to attach that information within the system as part of the permanent procurement file. Okay, so I will take you out, and this is our training environment. We do receive lots of questions about the training environment, and this is the environment that we encourage you to use whenever you are preparing to do a release off master. What we want you to do is get to the point where you feel confident and competent within the system enough so that when you are working in the actual procurement environment, you will be able to, move from the beginning to the end of a procurement and not have any errors in our live system. As you'll see as we go through this morning, once you complete the release off master process with the requisition and receiving all the necessary approvals, it does then send directly out to the vendor and start that process. So you want to ensure that you're very comfortable in working within the system before you begin to work in the live system. And your trainer should be able to assist you in doing that. Before you are fully trained, you will receive training credentials to log into the system so that you can practice, whenever you have free time. And one of the recommendations that we always have is, well, it's one thing to do a practice exercise. I think one of the best ways to prepare is to reach out and get an older procurement or a typical kind of procurement that you do at your agency and work through that within the system and see how the specifics of your procurement needs will apply within the system. So when you look here on the home page, you see some general information. There's information here for State of Illinois internal users, and you can click here for additional information. And then there are also the links to the resources for vendors. One of the things that's easy to do once you start working within a system is to just run down to the place where you log in and not necessarily look at all the information. But if we do have new information, we may post that out there. So when you do come out to the system, take a look and see if there's any new information. But we do have, some detailed information about the registration process for vendors. One of the things to know is that this external registration button here is specifically for vendor registration. For state users using the system, you are required to go through a more formal registration process that your trainer can help you with. It requires authorized signatures before you get into the system, so you do not register using this particular button. Further on down, and to just give you a general overview of this part of the system homepage, this information that says register is specific for vendors, and this is their process. Down here, there are 3 search links that can take you out where you can look at an open bid, you can look at active contracts, and then you can also come out and do a contract and bid search. So there's also a link at the very bottom for a registered vendor search. So all of this search functionality exists so that anyone, including the general public, can come out and look for publicly posted information and current contract information. I just want to point out here that when we say that they're searching for active contracts, that's active contract as it pertains to the BidBuy system. That does not mean that we are displaying to the general public, full contract documents and executed documents, but it's a word that's used within the system to show active contracts that exist, but not necessarily the active contract documents. Before I log in, I have another question. So someone says, BidBuy is mandatory for procurements over $2,000. Is it all right if agencies use it for procurements under that amount? Are there any limits? No, there is no minimum by which you can't go below that. So everyone is welcome to use the procurement, to use BidBuy for all of its procurements. It only becomes mandatory at the $2,000 threshold.
I would like to clarify also. So the $2,000 is for small purchases. Release off masters does not have a dollar limit. So if you are releasing off of a statewide master contract, you'll do that in BidBuy. And as mentioned before, that order will go directly to the vendor, and we'll walk you through that process here. But there is a difference between the threshold for release off masters, which is, $1 and up if you're purchasing it off of a master contract, or a small purchase, which is that $2,000.
Thank you. Okay, so I just went and logged into the system, and you'll see that it looks very much like the structure, and it is the structure that Samantha shared with you. Just to go back over sort of the significant areas within the system is you will see I have a variety of different roles because I have administrator roles within the system. Chances are you may see only 1, 2, or 3 of these roles potentially. You will either be in what's referred to as a DA or department access role, which will be the majority of users in the state will have that department access role where they can go in and make a requisition and do a release off of a master contract. The basic purchaser is also commonly referred to as the BP role, is for those who will be initiating procurements, doing ISBs, RFPs, that kind of thing. And then the inquiry role is the role for those who only have read-only rights and have no access, no ability to make any changes or conduct any procurements within the system. And then the header bar that Samantha shared with you is all here. And she also showed in her example the current organization being the state of Illinois, which sits over all of the agencies, which are also known as in BidBuy as organizations. In this particular case, I am out here in the CPO for General Services Agency, and so that is my specific agency or organization. Let me see, it looks like I have another contract. Someone says, will we be able to see the terms of the, oh, it just jumped, hold on. Will we be able to see the terms of the contract on BidBuy, i.e. minimum order required, or still have to look elsewhere for that? We'll go through that this morning, and I can show you some of that information. And then what about participation fees or CONF fees, convenience conference fees, over $2,000?
How those, yeah, well, I think those are like one-time procurements that they would do for like going to IAPO or something like that. So
that training will cover those requirements in future training webinars to not confuse what is required for release off masters. But we will address your question and respond to all questions submitted, but to just not confuse, you know, what is needed for release off masters. We'll hold off on answering some of these that may be specific to a small purchase or some other type of procurement method.
Okay, and so yeah, absolutely. And if there are any questions that we are not able to answer here for you today, we will definitely take note, and we can follow up with you, or you can follow up with us with very specific questions. But our goal here today is to give you enough basic information about the system so that you will be prepared for the release off master. So again, I am in my organization, and I want to procure, in my particular example, some fire extinguishers, and then I want maintenance for each of those fire extinguishers. So I'm going to go through, and one of the nice things that you will find out about BidBuy as you begin working within the system is that there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of different ways that you can go about establishing your procurement requisitions and, you know, conducting various activities within the system. But the method that I'm going to show you here this morning is one of the quickest and simplest ways to go about doing this, and it will be to use the quick buy functionality. So the quick buy functionality is probably one of the easiest things to see on the whole screen. It's right there, pretty much in the center, and it allows you to come out and do a quick search to find items that are available to be on a release off master contract. So, and each of these, as Samantha explained, you will see what is available to you within your agency to be able to release. So if there are very specific master contracts that exist for other agencies, that information is not going to be viewable by you. Everything that you view within the system will be that which you are able to go ahead and do a procurement from. So one of the other things to know about searching within the BidBuy system is less is more. So unlike a Google search, when you go out on Google and you can put in lots of information and Google somehow magically knows everything that we're thinking and everything that we've ever searched, you know, in our past, and is able to return to us very specific results based on the information that we put into the system. That is not how the search functionality works within BidBuy. Within BidBuy, it is a very literal search, and you will receive the exact results based on exactly what you put in the system. So our recommendation to you is to use simple words, fewer words, and you will get better results when searching within the system. So in this case, I know I need a fire extinguisher and I need maintenance for my fire extinguishers. So I am going to go ahead and I am simply typing in the word fire and seeing and determining what type of results are available to me within the system. So in this particular case, when I do a quick buy search and I search on the word fire, you'll see that I got a variety of different results. And you'll see that those results are organized over here in 2 tabs. These 2 tabs organize the information based on what's available for a release and what's available in a different kind of procurement. When we are doing a release off master, the only thing that we are interested in is what shows here on the release tab. And you'll see that we have received, in this particular case, 4 different results when searching under quick buy for the word fire. And if we look across our results, the first option we have is to go ahead and select one of these items to begin the process of doing a release of master contract. But before I do that, you know, I look at my next column and it gives me the opportunity to enter a quantity. But it will show me here if there is any minimum quantity required in order to do this release. And I think that answers one of the questions we were just asked. Will we be able to see if there are any minimums? And you will see that if there is a minimum order quantity required right here in your search results. Then I come across and I see that I have fire extinguishers with a unit cost of $160 and the unit of measure being each. So the cost is per fire extinguisher or each. There are lots of other units of measure that are available within the system. You can procure things, you know, in terms of, you know, their weight. You can procure things in terms of cartons and cases. But in this particular case, it's a simple $160 each. I also come over here and I see the vendor name, and in this particular case, the master contract is with Train Vendor 1. It also gives me the NIGP information specific to this particular release item, and I can look at that and make sure that that, in fact, is an item that I'm looking for. If there is any discount percent available related to a price list, that would be listed here. That's not the case. And then very importantly is a link that goes out to that original master blanket contract. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up in just a minute and show you the information that is available when you click on that link. And then the last column here indicates whether or not a direct release is allowed. The direct release is the type of release within the BidBuy system that allows you to create a requisition, get all your required agency or statewide approvals, and once all those approvals are received, the requisition is sent directly to the vendor. So that is what a direct release does. In 99.9% of the cases within the state of Illinois, a direct release will be allowed on master contracts. So more often than not, you will see the answer yes here. And when you are looking to do a simple release, that is what you're looking for, is a master contract that allows for a direct release. So in this case, as I'm looking at my 4 examples, I see fire extinguishers for $160. I see some fire extinguisher maintenance available to me for $1,000. Here's some fire extinguishers that are $100, and here's some fire extinguisher maintenance that's $125 a year. So I may, as I'm trying to decide which of these fire extinguishers and maintenance contracts are of interest to me, I will likely want to go out and take a look at that master blanket. When I click on that hyperlink, it will take me out to the original master blanket, and it will begin to tell me information about this so that I can take a look. at the details. And so I can come down here and I can look at what the short description was. I can read through the information. And one of the things I do want to point out here is when you are doing a release of master contract, you are able to see the type code for the original procurement method used. And I just want to point that out to you. I'm not going to go into detail on that now. In just about a minute, you'll see the importance of understanding that. But as you're looking at your master contract, you're going to want to make note of how this original contract was procured. So in our case, we're looking at competitive sealed bidding. And hold on a minute, and like I said, that will begin to make sense to you. The other thing that you're going to be able to see in this particular case on the original master is an executed purchase order or contract as it related to the original procurement. Down here in the attachments, you will see any attachments from the original procurement that are relevant and made available to the public. That does not mean every time we do a procurement, we make every document available for public viewing, but those documents that are available for you to view are available for you to look at here. And then you'll slide down and you see that the primary vendor information and purchase order terms are here for you to look at, shipping methods, shipping terms. If there's any distributor information, that's also listed here. And then there is information in this particular contract about the items. If you are looking at the items and you want to find more detail to make sure that this exactly is the kind of fire extinguisher that you are requesting, you can come down here to your item information and you can click on the small hyperlink that exists, and that will take you out and give you greater information specifically about this item. So I can look at the original quantity that was procured for the master contract information. Any other detail may exist here. I can also come out at this point. Oops, let me go back. And look at any of the details that are displayed here as it relates to the master. But I am going to back up, and I've looked at this, I've reviewed all of this information, and I am comfortable here that the fire extinguishers that are listed based on the information available to me are the fire extinguishers, in fact, that I do want. But I'm going to come down here and I'm going to look at the maintenance that is related to that, and I see that, you know, it's a quantity of $1,000 maintenance, and I may look at these terms and say, you know, I do want to buy those fire extinguishers, but this is not the other item I want. So I'm going to then review this information. I can come back, and using my back arrow, I will come back to my original set of results, and I am going to select a quantity of 100 of these fire extinguishers, because based on my review, those are, in fact, the fire extinguishers I want. But I'm not certain that that was the maintenance. So I will come down here, and I can go through and I can look at this particular master contract. Oh, let me show you. The master contract number here, as Samantha showed you, has a smart numbering system. In this particular case, this is the master blanket contract number that was for fiscal year 18, and it was for the CPO General Services Agency as well as the CPO General Services Department or location, and there is the number. So when we looked at that, we saw all of the items. We'll see down here that this is also the same number related to the original procurement, 1719, 1719. As you slide further down, though, you see another master contract that has the number 1721. And that is a different contract. I'm going to come down here before I decide which items I'm going to procure. And I'm going to take a look at this master. and I'm going to look at the terms specifically for this master. So I can come down here and look at this master contract. I can review all the same information, who the vendor is, what the terms are. I can look at any attachments that might be available to me off of this master, and I can look at the details of the maintenance item that is listed here. And in this particular case, as I'm looking at this item, if I want to see more details to make a decision as to whether I want to procure off the first master I looked at or the second, I can come here and click through on this link. I will see details specifically about the item. I can use my back button, and I've made a determination that I want this particular item off of the second master. So, I have to add back in my quantity of 100 fire extinguishers that I wanted off the master 1719, and I'm also going to come down here and order 100 of these items off of a different master contract. So I am now doing one release requisition, but I am doing that release off of two different master contracts.
One thing that I would like to note before we move forward is this is an example. You will still need to follow the requirements of that contract. So this is purely for demonstration purposes.
Exactly. So when you select these items, you're able to come down and you can add those items to an existing requisition that you are working on. If you wanted to do that, you have that option. You can look at one of these other requisitions that you are working on and you can add it to a requisition that you are working on, or you can begin to establish a new requisition, and that is allowed down here through the button at the bottom of the screen. So that is the option that I'm going to take, is to add these items to a new requisition. So once I do that, I click through, and you can see that those two items that I selected and their quantities are added to my new release requisition, and I can begin processing through everything that I will need to do in order to create the release off of this master contract. I'm going to go ahead. I do have a question here before I go to the next stage and see if there are any questions that I can assist with. So this question is specific to how will the purchase of individual office supplies be purchased from the vendor, and there will be additional training forthcoming as it relates to the office supplies contract. Once that contract is finalized, we will come back and do some specific training specific to those masters. But there may be opportunities, as I think is sort of being alluded to here, to either order directly through a catalog, or there will also be standard methods of releasing items through some of those masters. But that's a really good question, because there will be different methods for doing that. The one that I'm showing you here today is a method where a master contract exists, and we go and we select items to create a new requisition directly in BidBuy.
And we also saw an additional question asking about approvals. Can you please show us, how the approvals will work? And the demonstration that I'm going to give a bit later, I will show you that process and how that will display to the users. Okay, so we have our two items that are established here. One of the things that I want to point out is that when you are working within BidBuy and you are working within a tabular format, one of the most important things to remember each and every time is before you ever leave a tab, you must click Save and Continue. If you are on your Items tab and you looked at your items and you said, oh, that's great, and you did not save and continue, there's a very good likelihood that if you went to another tab, you will lose the information from that tab. So every time that you move from one tab to another tab, please remember to click Save and Continue. In fact,
You can save and continue more than once, and if you're not entirely sure whether you saved, and it's not going to create any problems within the system. So save more and save often on every single tab. So that is our items tab here. If I wanted to go back out and take a look at any other information that I needed to know, I could do that, because you see that there is a link for each item that goes back to the original master contract, but we've already taken a look at that, and we know what that is, and we're comfortable with the items that appear here. So moving from top to bottom and left to right throughout the system, I'm going to come out to my general tab, which is the place on my release requisition that I put in all the basic information about my procurement. And in many cases, you will see that a lot of that is already filled out for you as a result of your login to the system. It's aware of who you are and where you work. You'll also see, though, each of these items that exist within a box, you're able to create a change. So it's going to give you a default, but if there are other options that are available to you that are more appropriate, you will be able to select and change those. In my particular case, I have one department and one location that I am assigned to, and so that's all that's available to me in the system. I also want to come back up over here and wanted to point out to you this status up here in the corner. When Samantha did the presentation and on the slide, she showed you the variety of statuses that exist within the BidBuy system, and that's available to you for future reference that you can go back to. So right now, we are just beginning our requisition, and the status here shows that we are in progress. That is a helpful item so that as you're working through, you can always be clear that you're in the right place on the procurement that you're working on. So going back here to my general tab, you'll see that that has been completed for me, and that information is available to me. I'm able to enter in a required by date if I do, in fact, have a specific date that I require my procurement by. But you will also note here that, as is common throughout the internet, if there's an asterisk, that is a required field. In the case of the required by date, there is no asterisk there, so that information is not required. But that information may be very helpful, and that may be a very important part of your procurement. So if you do know and have a required by date, you should, in fact, enter it in there. But if you don't, it's not required. The next item down here is a requisition type, and this has been pre-populated because when you do a quick buy, the system understands that you are attempting to do a release off of a master contract, and so that information has been completed for you. There are, if you were to look at this drop-down box, other kinds of requisition types that are used when you're doing different kinds of procurements. But for our purposes, we only need to know that we are looking to do a release off of a master contract. The system knows it's me, so it's completed my name as the contact person, but there also is the alt ID. We leave this field blank. We do not complete the information in the alt ID. We never enter information in the alt ID. The system, yes?
Sorry. So the reason why it's important to leave the alternate ID blank is because the alternate ID is used on the purchase orders specifically for the SAP interface. So the release requisition will carry, in some instances, information forward to the purchase order. So general statement cannot confuse, well, can I enter it here on the requisition, or am I not supposed to? Generally, that's why we don't put anything in the alternate ID, because when that SAP interface is live, it may cause an error in your document.
Absolutely. So the best thing to know is here on this release requisition is don't put anything in that alternate ID. It's going to give you an estimated cost, and this is a very important item here. It's based on those items that were on our item tab, and that estimated cost is the basis for routing this through the approval process. So it is on the basis of this estimated cost that this release requisition will go through its approval. The print format, it's really just to be left. It predetermines that, and there are no other changes that we want to use as it relates to the print format. The agency reference number is there for the individual agencies to use. So if at your agency you have a different numbering system and your numbering system says that that is a 33-1234, you can in fact put that in your agency reference number. It is a free text field for you to use as you wish. Under the special procurement type, you will see that there are some options that are used for different kinds of procurements. In our case of this release off master, there are no special procurement types that apply, so we leave that empty and in the default. And down here is a link to the original contract. Links to an original contract are used throughout the system. We don't have a need right here to add that. We have links to our original contract that already have been established on our items tab. When I come up here to my short description, this is something that each agency should think through in terms of how you want your short description to work so that you have consistency throughout the system. We have a recommended method. Short description is a searchable field, and so we want to make the best use that we can of our short description. So what we recommend is that you begin by putting in the acronym for your agency, then any information specific to the procurement. In this case, it is, fire extinguishers and maintenance, and then conclude with your initials. By having all of that information in the short description, you should be able to quickly and easily search for specific procurements. And if you are consistent across your agency, you should be able to then also identify your agency procurements that are being done by others. So that is a recommendation, but you're able to use the short description as you wish. Down here at solicitation enabled, we do not need to do anything with that particular field, but you will see a very important field here, which is the type code. What the type code is looking for here on this release requisition was how were the items that are on this procurement, how were they originally procured? So you'll recall that when I opened up one of the links to the master contract for the fire extinguisher, and I said, this is an important area for you to remember, it is from that original master contract that you can obtain that information as to how the items on this release were originally procured. So in the example that we looked at, they were procured through competitive sealed bidding, and that is the information that you would select. But as you can see, there are many other methods of procurement that could be used on a requisition in this case. So it was a competitively sealed procurement. Again, my name is listed here. My contact information is a default information. If there was anything I needed to update or change about that, I could, but that is auto-populated for me. So I would come down here, click Save and Continue, and see that my changes were saved successfully. So I've already reviewed my Items tab. I know that that information was correct. I will come down here and look at the vendor information, and this was, in fact, the vendor that was listed on both of the master contracts that I was doing this release from. And I can come down here and select any specific remit to information as it relates to this particular vendor. So I would save and continue as it relates to this tab. The address tab is one of the most critical tabs that will exist within the system. So the first thing to know about information on the address tab is in order for you to use an address within BidBuy, it must be pre-populated within the system. You do not have the ability to go into the system and enter any address that you would like something to be shipped to or billed to. So those addresses must exist within your agency and be available for you to select through the search functionality within the system. We have emphasized this and reviewed this with agencies as it relates to their address lists and their shipping locations. We've provided agencies with that information to update and give us the latest information. If you are doing a procurement and you go to find an address and you cannot locate the appropriate location that you want to ship to, you can reach out to us and we can update that information. But all agencies have been given an opportunity to give us their most current shipping information. So please know that that is very critical. One of the things that you will find in this system is there are a lot of opportunities to do things in many different ways. We're showing you a very basic release off of a master process, and Amy will be showing you things, parts of the process that are a little bit more in-depth in a couple of minutes. But in this particular case, I am going to apply my shipping address, my single shipping address to all items. So I go ahead and I do that. And I'm also going to apply my bill to address to all items. So I want everything shipped and billed to the same place. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to do a save and continue until I get that yellow notice that tells me that my changes have been saved successfully. What I'm going to do here really quickly, and this is just for an example purpose, is I'm going to come down here. I'm going to just say that I, wanted to skip over, and you'll see here that I am getting a red error. I did this intentionally to show you that as you're working through the BidBuy system, if you see a red error within the system, that is a hard stop for you. So red errors within the system tell you that you must fix something before you can go any further. In this particular case, I was just over here on my address tab, and it's telling me that I need to add accounting information. So if you receive other errors within the system that are yellow or another color error or message, those can be soft warnings to you. Anything that you see in red is a hard stop warning, and you won't be able to move beyond it. So knowing that I was down there and it reminded me that my accounting information was missing, I come back out here to my accounting tab, and you will see that there are a variety of fields that are available to use within the system as it relates to accounting. At this time, the only item that is required, and you can tell that by the little asterisk, is to enter in whether there is any special procurement type that applies to this procurement. And in this particular case, the special procurement type is located down here, and you can come in and you click on the magnifying glass, which takes you to your search functionality, and you click on Find It to input into the system whether this is any special procurement type as it relates to the accounting function. In our particular case, this is not applicable, but if this was a procurement that was in anticipation of litigation, that was a joint purchasing procurement, or a purchase of care type of procurement, you would select one of those options. So I will go down here and select not applicable, because that is what is appropriate. And you see that when I do that, it fills in this particular field and indicates that it is not applicable. There are other accounting fields here that can be used within the system, but are not required, and there will be additional training upcoming as it relates to the use of those accounting fields. But at this time, the important thing to know as it relates to our release off master date is that you must, in fact, identify if it's any of those special procurement types. What you do at that point, what the system gives you the option of doing, is you'll see if I slide down here, this particular procurement and the accounting information can be allocated against the procurement either based on a percentage of procurement or on a number of dollars. So, for those of you who specifically work in accounting, sometimes you're doing a procurement and part of the procurement is related to one accounting fund, part of the procurement is going to be paid for by another accounting fund, and the BidBuy system gives you the ability to make those determinations. In our case, because we're not putting in the specific funding codes, and the only thing that we're adding here is special procurement information that's not applicable, I can come down and say this either based on percentages. I can say 100% of this procurement has no special procurement type that's applicable to it, or I can say all the dollars related to this procurement type are not applicable to any special procurement. So in this particular case, and from a general direction perspective, we give you guidance to save your procurements when you're doing this kind of procurement based on percentages and say this applies to 100% of my procurement. And then you have to come back in and do a second click, which is to rebuild this accounting information for all the items on the procurement. So here on the accounting tab, save based on percentages, and then rebuild that information for every item that I am releasing. So save it based on percentages and apply it to everything that is on this release. I have a couple of questions here. I'm going to stop and see. I think these are some general questions, so I think I'm going to save these questions for a little bit further on. I wanted to make sure I didn't get too far before I had a question that I missed an opportunity to answer. So they're pretty general questions, and we'll hold those for a couple of minutes or more towards the end of our webinar. But please do keep sending in your questions because we do appreciate them. Okay, so we have that information. We've saved and applied our accounting special procurement information. I will come down here. Your routing tab is where approvals will attach. We have nothing, and it does not attach until you actually send it through the approval process. So routing tab on a release off master is nothing to be concerned with at this particular point in time. But your attachments tab are an important area to know and understand. So when you are doing a requisition, this will serve to be truly what you're accustomed to thinking of as a procurement justification at the $10,000 and above threshold. So the procurement justification form is required on a requisition, including a release off of a master contract at $10,000 and above. So in our case, we know we're doing a procurement that is over the $10,000 threshold, and I have two options for adding in my procurement justification form. I can add a form that exists within the system, but we also have files available if our form functionality is not working. And we've had some instances where we've had some trouble with the forms. But you are able to either add a form from within BidBuy or add a file that sits out on your computer. So if you have a procurement justification form, you've completed it on your computer, you can go ahead and go out and do a search. And it's just like other search types of attachments. You go out and browse, and you go out into your drives. You find the form that you have completed, and you can attach a form like you would any kind of, attachment process, computer-based attachment process. We also have worked to make it a little more convenient, and we'll see if it cooperates. But there is a form function within BidBuy, and in this case, we have a pre-established procurement justification form And if I select that form and click Edit and Attach Form, I sometimes receive an error. If I hit it a second time, it will often open up for me, and I can complete and attach this form all within the system. But do know, we have both options. It's here as a form, and it's also available to you in hard copy, so you can attach it from your computer, whichever works best for you. So these are the standard fields that you would see on a form. It comes down, and I've just typed in demo for our demo today, but you would actually go through and fill out your objectives and your economic justification and so forth. And then if there is a special condition, such as a brand name or an emergency or some other special condition that applies, you click one of those and you can explain that down here. In my case, I'm going to say there is no special condition that applies here, and I am going to save that. You'll see it shows me that my save is complete. I will exit from my form function, and in this particular case, let's see, if I come out here, I can look and see which of those forms was in fact the correct form. So, hopefully you're starting to see a pattern throughout the system that when there's an opportunity for you to take a further look for those small hyperlinks with the underlines, and that is how you can come out and take a look and see what information is available to you. So I see this is the one that I filled in with all the demo information. I can exit from that, and I see somehow we ended up with a couple of forms, which is not uncommon. You might attach a form, in a process or a file in a process, and then further down the line realize you need to delete that, take that off, and add an updated version of the form. So the ability to delete is included here in your attachment tab. I'm going to delete that first one. Click by clicking Save and Continue, and you'll see that it deleted the thing I wanted to take off. The other thing to know and understand about your attachment tab when you're doing a release requisition is, do I want to show this particular document to the vendor? Do I want to send this off for the vendor to see? Always important to look at that. And in the case of our procurement justification form, that's really not a document that we would show to the vendor. So I can go through here and I can uncheck Show to Vendor, and I save and continue. And when this is sent to the vendor will not see this particular document. But I have the ability, as you saw, to come in, add, delete, go back and forth. Okay, so I save that out. I can add any notes that I want here to myself. We all want to be very aware that notes within the system become a permanent part of the procurement file. So if you're adding notes, make sure that they're, easy to understand, very, clear, and, concise. You don't want to necessarily in your notes add, a soliloquy about your procurement. You just want to add some basic notes. If I had any notes, I'd save that. I can also create a reminder to myself. And in the case of a reminder, which is one I think of the most helpful features within the BidBuy system and one that we're all going to take a lot of advantage of, I can set the due date for which I want a reminder set within the system. I can enter in a comment to remind me why I'm setting a reminder. So in this case, by Friday the 13th, by this Friday, I want to check and see if the approvals have come through in case I haven't received any information. So I'm going to send a reminder to check for the approval. I then have the ability to select any person to remind in the system for which any person that has access to my organization. So it's not everyone in the state, it's only those people that have access within the system that I can add a reminder to, including myself. And so I think that's one of the best features, to be able to send yourself a reminder for a task that you need to do within the system in case the time passes and you haven't had a chance to go back and look. The days prior to remind are related to the due date. So if I want to get my reminder on October 13th, I say no days prior. October 13th. However, if I wanted to do something on October 13th and I wanted to be reminded the day before or 2 days before, I can go in and set a reminder. But one of the simplest things to do is put the due date you want your reminder on, and then say no earlier than that. Just send me a reminder on that date, and please do send me an email, and I can save and continue. So that's the reminder functionality. As you can see, by the time I set one reminder, I can add additional. So if I wanted to send multiple reminders, I can do that. And if I looked at it and made a mistake and I want to delete it, I can do that too. Always going to the bottom of my screen, always clicking save and continue. Now I am out here on my summary tab, and I have the opportunity. The summary tab gives me an overview of everything that I have entered throughout the system, and you'll see down here, I can look at all the information. I actually can see my estimated cost, my contacts, my original type codes, you know, all of the information that I have entered throughout this process before I go off and make a final determination. You also see that I can see down here the attachments that I added and my reminder. And then if I wanted to expand out, I can look at the information about the items that I have added to my release. And once I'm comfortable and confident that all that information is accurate, I will submit it for approval. Samantha explained what we are seeing here in our demo is we use an automatic approval process in our training environment, but as Samantha explained, agencies have established the approval paths that they want and the various thresholds that they want the approvals to occur in, and so the system will automatically route through the pre-established approvals. In our case, for training purposes, we simply go through and we do an automatic approval. What you now see here on your summary tab is that two separate and distinct purchase orders have been created because in our particular case, we were ordering off two separate and distinct master contracts. So the final steps that I will have to do is go through and in our case, since we are over the $20,000 threshold, we do need an executed contract to be attached to this particular procurement. So what I'd like to do is click out here, and I'm going to do a demonstration in the event of one of these, and I am going to show you that when I click through to my purchase order, at the bottom of the screen, I see all the information about the PO or purchase order that was sent to the vendor, and I know it was sent when I look up here in the corner at the status, and I see that this is in sent status. So the purchase order has been sent, and the vendor has received an email indicating that they have a purchase order that requires various actions on their particular part, and included in their BidBuy account will be information about various things that they're required to do to acknowledge the purchase order. And there are also instructions here to the vendor that advises them when and how they are to sign this agreement. So in this particular case, it indicates that this purchase order agreement and any related contract documents must be fully executed in its entirety prior to commencement of billable work, receipt of goods, or rendering of any services. So in our particular case, knowing that this is at the $20,000 threshold, we do have a note down here that advises the vendor that this would not apply if it was a release purchase order off of a master contract less than 20, but in our particular case, it does apply because it's a release off a master contract more than 20. So down here at the bottom of the purchase order, and you'll see this is only the one purchase order with the one item because I ordered off of two master contracts. There is the place here for the vendor signature, the printed name, the title, and all the specific information that the vendor will need to add to this particular purchase order. There's also an area here for the state of Illinois to go through and complete the execution of this contract, as well as a place for Illinois to add all the specific details. So in the case of our particular vendor, the vendor would execute their portion of that purchase order. It would be returned back to the agency. The agency would execute and would attach that final executed purchase order through the change order process. So I'll take you very quickly to the change order process and show you that, and then we'll open it up for some questions as well as some additional demonstrations. So quickly, the change order process. Once the agency were to receive the executed contract from the vendor, as well as the additional signatures, the agency can come out here and create a change order, click on attachments. They can go out to their computer, search for that executed, fully executed contract, and add, let me go back, browse, use the browse button to find your fully executed agreement and attach any document here by clicking and then click Save and Continue. So it is the change order process that is used to attach that final executed purchase order to the procurement file as the last step in the release of master.
On the purchase order, it's very important to remember what your dollar amounts are to determine what signature you need. If there are any questions on, well, what if it's, under 20 or over 20 or over 250,000, for example, and you're not sure, what do I need? And please reach out to your agency staff, just as you would today when you're unsure about what is needed for a particular type of release off master contract or any other type of procurement activity that you're doing.
And that was a great answer, because as I pulled up our questions, that is one of the questions that someone submitted and said, for auditing purposes, there's a paper contract on a release off master. Is it required to have the BidBuy purchase order? And so that was, in fact, the process that we just demonstrated, where that final executed purchase order is attached and made a part of the procurement file. And someone says, so even, off of the master, and yes, at $20,000 and above with a master, the signatures are required.
And that is a bit different than what IGPS, how IGPS operated. So with IGPS, if you had, if you were ordering off of a contract in that system, it would do the obligation for you. But that didn't necessarily negate the fact that you needed a wet signature contract to meet those comptroller requirements. So with BidBuy in particular, it does not have that obligation piece with the comptroller's office. So as with any contract, you still need to meet those comptroller requirements and whatever wet signature pieces are needed, dependent on the dollar amount.
And some other really good questions before I turn this over to Amy. Let's see. Is it mandatory that all contracts attached to the PO be made visible to the public, not just to the vendor under contract? And the answer to that is no. So your trainer will share with you and show you. We have a document that shows you the variety of attachments that are traditionally used in a procurement process, and our recommendations for when you show those and when you make those confidential. So please ask your trainer to go through that information with you in detail. Our general rule is when you are if you are in doubt of whether you should make something publicly visible or not make it publicly visible, our general rule is to not make something publicly visible if you do not know for sure that you're supposed to. And the reason for that is we do not want to inadvertently display or disclose confidential or personal or proprietary information. so be very certain when you are making a document available to the public that there is not a redacted version or some other information that would prevent you from making that public. Very important, and thank you for that question. We have some other questions about just some, I think, general system-specific defaulting information, and we continue to follow up with that. Where is the funding source identified, or if it needs to be changed? And so that will be answered in the next part of our demonstration. So this process that I just completed was the release off master contract with a direct release that was sent directly to the vendor. The vendor then did respond with an executed contract that was executed and then attached to the purchase order. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and Amy can answer some additional questions as well as demonstrate some additional processes.
Thank you, Lori. So I'm just going to go ahead and stay logged in under Lori's account, just to make the transition a bit easier. So I'm just going to go head back to her home page, and what I'm going to be demonstrating in this round is how to order against a contract where prices may change frequently. So this example also has a discount percentage, and then we'll refer to a separate document to find, what is the current market price that I need to enter. So that's the goal mainly for this demonstration, but I will also be demonstrating the accounting and the approval functionality. And before we get started, we do have a question. So we do have some questions regarding the purchase order. Does it take place at the BOA? For example, with BidBuy, what we suggest is as we begin this process, that the purchase order will take its place. So you can print it off, you can get those signatures, but if you feel most comfortable having that other supporting documentation, any other additional terms and conditions that are needed, those requirements stay the same. So if you like to have that BOA attached, you can go ahead and fill that out, but you can obtain those signatures on the purchase order. But again, you may need the standalone contract or other supporting terms and conditions dependent on what you're buying. For release off masters, those are a bit different. So, disclosures and such, may not be needed. But yes, if supporting documentation, I know that some agencies have very particular terms and conditions that they like to include in addition to, what is already a part of the master contract. The agency, we have a kind of a question statement. The agency does not obtain signatures until we receive the vendor signed copy. So what the process will be is the vendor sees that print PO. That vendor will sign that PO and return that along with any other documentation required to turn back over to the agency for review or confirmation or what have you. At that time, once the vendor PO signed version is received, the agency will sign and move forward with the rest of the process and obligation and so forth. And then we have a couple of other questions regarding the BOA. So let me just kind of read through these real quick and kind of bundle them together. Okay, and I believe that I just answered those questions, but if clarification is needed or you have additional questions, please let me know. Also, after this demonstration, we will go back to all of these questions received formally answer them and provide responses just for clarification and a more formal process in responding to the questions asked today. Okay, so I am logged in to BidBuy, and I'm going to demonstrate the discount percent for a release. So I'm going to go in to the quick buy, and what I would like to point out before I begin is my example is much more higher level. I'm not going to get into all of the detail that Lori just went over with you, such as all the attachments and things like that. So this is really geared towards just showing the discount percent for that type of contract, and also for those types of contracts where prices may change frequently. So I'm going to go into Quick Buy, and my item that I'm going to search for is example item. So you can see here that I have my item selected. It is an IT discount percent off MSRP release off master example item. Very generic. I'm keeping it high level for you since we just went through all that detail. I want 10 of those. You'll see here that it doesn't have a unit cost, and that the unit of measure is each, the vendor information, and so on and so forth. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click on this contract, and I'm going to make sure I have what I need. So the type code here is competitive skilled bidding. I'm going to add that onto my release requisition. And then also too, you can see that I have a discount percent cost sheet. So I'm just going to go ahead and open this up. And save it to my desktop. I'm not going to change the name of it. And it's there for me. Here I can see what my unit cost is at this time, and that I have a 5% discount. I'm going to go back and I'm going to add this to a new rec. What this does is it takes you to your items tab automatically. Here you can see that this is my item that I wanted, that this is the quantity that I wanted. But now on this one, you can see that I have a minimum order quantity. So on this particular master contract, I am required to order a minimum of 2. I'm ordering 10, so I'm fine. You can see here now that this is all 0, but this is a link. So the catalog price or the unit cost, I'm going to pull from my supporting cost sheet, $200, and I'm going to enter that here. When I tab over now, you'll see that the $200 for a quantity of 10 with the 5% discount is a net unit cost of $190 for that, for each. But the total, it takes off $100, so it's $1,900. And I'm just going to save and exit. And you can see the same here, $1,900. So it does all the math for you. And then I'm going to save and continue. From this, I'm going to go back to the General tab, and I'm going to finish filling out the rest of my regular release requisition information. It pre-fills much of this information. And then my type code, I remember that it was the original master was done through bidding process, so I'm going to select the same for my release. And then, as Lori mentioned, you can fill in the agency reference number, and we're going to move on. What I'm going to do here is would instruct is to click on these tabs and make sure that there's nothing on them that you want to update. So on here, I'm going to click the address for this vendor. If there were other addresses available for this vendor, this is where you would select them. If the address for the vendor that you're trying to select does not appear, you can contact that vendor, request them to update their vendor account and include additional addresses. If the vendor does not want to update, but it is required or it's not there for a particular reason, go ahead and contact the vendor help desk and they can assist you. So I have my changes saved. This is my address information. I'm just going to make sure that it's up to date and it's what I want. I'm confirming. And then when I get to the accounting tab here, I'm going to select not applicable. Saved on percentages, rebuild for all items. Now your fiscal personnel may want you to fill in some of these additional fields, such as major object code or the fund that you'd like to use. So please be sure to stay in communication with your fiscal personnel on what they require and what their processes are. But that is where you can enter in that information here. So I've saved. You'll see that there is nothing currently on the routing tab. So there aren't any approval paths found currently for this in-progress release requisition. And you won't see anything here until you submit for approval, because the system wants to know, what are all of the requirements. So you need to submit for approval for it to say, okay, now all of my requirements are final. I know what paths I need to hit. For my release requisition, I may be required to attach that cost sheet. I saved it to my desktop, so I'm just going to browse. I'm going to go to my desktop and select that pricing sheet and save and exit. As you can see here, this one I can show to the vendor. They need that information as well. And then I'm just going to kind of skip over and go to the summary tab. Here I can double check everything is correct and submit for approval. So I see that we have a couple of questions in. I know that we're short on time. So for time's sake, we're going to just kind of keep track of what questions have come in. I'm going to finish up this process and then check questions, and those who wish to stay can stay to ask more questions or hear the answers for the questions that have been asked since the last round. Yes, so here what I'm going to do is to show you the what the approvers see. In Train, we don't have approval paths set up, because when you're going in and you're working through your practice exercises or whatever it is that you're doing in the Train environment, you don't want it to get caught up on someone's approval path, and then they're on vacation for 5 days or something like that, and then here you are waiting on them to approve your document. So in the Train environment, we purposely have left those out. Also, too, that prevents other people in the system from receiving emails that are unnecessary and clogging up their inbox. So that's why I'm just going to manually add an approver here, because we don't have them configured in the Train environment. I'm going to select myself and then save and continue. What that does when you can manually add, well, I should have selected Lori. Let me go back and, well, I forgot I was logged in as Lori. I apologize. So we'll see. This may be interesting. I may need to log in as myself and log out as her. So as you can see here, ready for approval. And Amy is waiting on her. So what I'm going to do,
So Amy is logging in as herself, as would be the case. If she were listed on an approval path, she would have received an email that said her approval was required. And so she is logging into the system and will then conduct the approval.
So here you can see the approval tab. And you can see the documents pending my approval. So I'm going to check. I have 5439 and 5439. So just for time's sake, I'm going to list and approve these all at once. And if I want to, I can leave a comment. Of course, as an approver, I'm going to go into each of these, review the information that I'm supposed to be approving, and ensure that it is accurate. One of the things that I do actually want to show you while I'm in here is the accounting tab. So we go back to the accounting tab, and you can see for fiscal, you're going to really like this option. So most everything is locked down once it's submitted for approval, but the accounting tab is open. So fiscal can go in here if they say, oh, this is blank, or the funding source is wrong, or I want to use a different fund. For example, I can type this in here and update it. And I'll go back to summary. This is saved. And approve. And you'll see now that it's gone to PO. I'm going to refresh my page, and you will see that it is gone to PO. So now I am back in Lori's role, and that it is now a purchase order. So here's my purchase order. And you would follow the steps as Lori explained in going through that change order process, getting those vendor signatures, and going through all of those details to ensure that you have a fully executed contract in place dependent on the requirements for the dollar amount of the release purchase order. At this time, we will follow up with questions, and then we'll close out since we're a little bit over the originally scheduled time. So thank you, and we will be in contact. So let's see here what questions we have. Yes, so we had a comment in here that agencies may need to navigate to an outside vendor website. The price list may not be attached to the master blanket purchase order. And will those have to be a change order every time we need to update it? So this question kind of combines a couple of things. One, dealing with how do we update those price sheets on a master blanket PO, and two, where we may need to go to find those price sheets. So in the contract, it will give you instructions on where to find those price sheets when required. Just as today, for example, if you get on the bulletin and it says you need to go to this website to look at the current pricing sheet. Also, too, if it's another type of contract that for fuel, for example, CMS will have instruction for you on where to find that pricing information. All that information is really dependent on the contract and will be part of the instruction for where to find that information will be a part of the contract in BidBuy. So, and Mary, we will get together and discuss, how you can update the pricing sheet. For release requisition, you would use whatever is applicable. So if it's that week's fuel prices, that's what you'll use. just as you do today, and so on and so forth. But for the contracting portion of it, we can get together and discuss options, because I don't believe a change order will be needed every time you want to change a price. So we have another question. When there is a discounted price, you have to go to the Excel document, save it, then put the discounted cost in. So what this does with functionality in the system, this is an option for a user when they're setting up a master blanket PO. One of the easiest things is that when setting up the master contract, you can leave that unit cost blank. And when you leave that unit cost blank on the master blanket side, it allows you to fill in, it allows the person releasing against that contract to fill in the most current. So for example, a price changes weekly. To prevent the owner of that contract, so the buyer, or the contract manager, from having to go in every week and update that price, they can leave it blank, share the pricing sheet, and the user can type it in. Very similar to what you may do today on the BOA for those types of contracts that have MSRP or something like that associated with them. So in some cases, it may be auto-populated. In my example, it was not. Our understanding was that the state user should be contacting the state user help desk with questions, not the vendor help desk. Has that changed? That has not changed in regards to process questions or system questions or errors or that type. The vendor help desk, part of their responsibility is to ensure that vendor information as needed is a part of BidBuy. So for example, if you're trying to do a small purchase and a vendor is not in there, and you contact the vendor and you say, you know, hey, vendor A, we'd really like you to get registered in BidBuy. We have this, you know, please do that. And they don't, okay? So then you go through with your process, your bidding process, but they see it out on the website. So they're looking at the website, but they're not registered. And they see the opportunity out on the website, and they decide to respond through paper bid. And this is all part of the vendor training. So the vendors will, you know, understand how to respond and that type of thing. But stay on track with, you know, how to get a vendor into BidBuy. We're going to walk through this. So the vendor sees the opportunity out on the website. They respond through paper, and you're trying to put their quote in. And again, the vendor says, you know, I don't want to register. I don't want to. I'm going to be lazy or whatever. And that is the point where you would contact the vendor help desk and say, I need to put this quote in. My vendor says they don't want to register, that they don't have the time. Can you put it in? Can you register the vendor, please? And then at that point, the vendor administrator will create a vendor record for that user, so that you can then put their quote in to build the procurement file in BidBuy. So in some instances, in most instances, you will be contacting the state user help desk after you've asked your trainer an APO and or SPO if it's a process question, because every agency does things a little bit different. And then for vendor-specific questions, you can contact the vendor help desk or contact, you know, the vendor directly and talk to the vendor about their BidBuy registration. But if in doubt, please contact the vendor help desk, and they will be able to assist you with the appropriate steps. So we have one question that is specific to the bidding process in BidBuy, such as a more formal bid. And that training, you know, will be provided by your agency. This is kind of a train-the-trainer program. So we train the trainers, and then your agency trainers train you. But this webinar is specific to release off master contracts. And then we have one other question. How will SEO approvals work for steps 1, 3, and 4? So to really stay specific to the releases off masters, what occurs is, in most instances, you don't, I don't want to say most, but with exceptions, the SEOs are involved in releasing off master contracts. In those instances where they are, we configured the approval paths to hit for those exceptions, such as, you know, IT, for example, where they are required to be involved. And so those approval paths will hit for those particular types of releases when needed. And we've, you know, discussed that with the senior SEOs, and we'll, you know, discuss in depth with the SEO approvals. But if you have any questions dealing with SEOs on a particular type of procurement method, you know, please let us know. But that is how they are set for release off masters. And then we have a question. Once the vendor signs, who does the document come back to? So for release off masters, once the vendor signs, the signed purchase order and supporting documents would come back to the buyer. So, or whoever in your agency based on your agency process. So it would not go back to the CMS buyer, for instance, for a release off master. It would go back to whoever in your agency has the authority to receive that and get those signatures. So it may be the same person who released, or it may be someone else who needs to go in and seek those signatures. So that is really based on your agency processes for ordering off of master contracts. And we understand that it is, for those who are used to ordering through IGPS, this is a bit of a different process. It's really very similar to the process that you use when you release off of a master that isn't an IGPS type. And that is all the questions that have come in. We appreciate your time today, and I will kind of send it back to Lori for any wrap-up comments she'd like to make. But thank you for attending today, and the recording will be available.
Yes, thank you so much. We had a very large audience participate, and the next steps for you as it relates to preparing in BidBuy is to reach out to your agency trainer and begin that process if you've not already completed it. We do know and have received information back from the agencies that quite a number of agencies have gone through the complete training program. But do know that you will not be able to get an official registration in the system until you have completed training and your registration form has received the 3 required signatures of the BidBuy trainer, your agency executive director or designee, and also and yourself. So those are the 3 signatures that you need, and so that will be required before you can actually log into the BidBuy system, which is going live next Monday. So please pursue any of those options that you are required to complete in advance of the Monday Release Off Master go live. Thank you very much. Oh, looks like we have one more question.
Yes, the obligation with the comptroller's office will be covered in a future webinar. In regards to obligation with the comptroller's office, that process really isn't changing. So the document the comptroller's office is expecting to receive this print PO as part of the supporting documentation that they would get for any procurement method. And so they understand that they may see BOAs, that they may see this new purchase order, or any other documentation that they're used to seeing with signatures on it from the agencies and vendor relationships. So that part is not changing. The only part that is changing is the IGPS piece of it. If you ordered from IGPS in IGPS, it obligated it for you. So you didn't need to do a COD. So this process is pretty much the same as ordering off of a master contract that is not in IGPS. Only it's in BidBuy. So you do the release requisition, you have all of the same supporting documents needed, all of the signatures needed on the purchase order just as you do today. You gather all of that documentation together and say it needs to go to the comptroller's office, right? So you have that copy that goes to the comptroller's office. It has the signed contract, it has any supporting documentation, maybe it needs the supporting cost sheet to demonstrate to the comptroller's office that you have the right price. And that gets sent over to the comptroller's office for $20,000 and above. In IGPS, you could have done maybe a $5 order and it still obligated it for you. The comptroller's office doesn't require that. It was just part of IGPS functionality. And so really now it's that $20,000 and up, unless for whatever reason you want to obligate things under $20,000.
And Tamara, we will follow up with you directly on your question and point you in the right direction.
All right, well, that is all the questions that we've received. Again, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to send those in, and we will get them addressed. We'll work through these questions, provide a formal response, and then also notify you when the recorded webinar is available.
Thank you very much.